The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Buckingham Palace as King Charles III stood before his ornate mirror, adjusting his ceremonial uniform. Today marked a significant day in the royal calendar, the annual ceremony honoring Queen Camilla's contributions to the Commonwealth. But beneath the formal proceedings lay a deeper, more personal agenda that weighed heavily on his mind. Charles had spent countless sleepless nights contemplating the fractured relationship with his younger son, Prince Harry. The rift that began with Harry's departure from royal duties had only deepened with each passing month, creating a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. Yet today, in front of dignitaries, family members, and millions watching worldwide, Charles planned to deliver a message that would resonate far beyond the ceremonial halls. The King's private secretary, Margaret Thornton, entered the chamber with the final speech draft. Her weathered hands trembled slightly as she handed over the documents, knowing full well the gravity of what those words contained. Charles had spent weeks crafting this speech, balancing his roles as sovereign and father, ensuring every phrase carried both diplomatic weight and personal meaning. As Charles reviewed the pages one final time, his mind wandered to memories of Harry as a child. He remembered the young prince's infectious laughter echoing through Windsor Castle, his mischievous grin when caught in some harmless prank, and the proud moment when Harry graduated from Sandhurst. Those golden memories now felt like fragments from another lifetime, overshadowed by years of public disagreements and private heartbreak. The royal family had gathered in the blue drawing room for the pre-ceremony briefing. Prince William arrived first, his face carrying the burden of being caught between loyalty to his father and love for his brother. Princess Anne followed, her no-nonsense demeanor masking deep concern for the family's unity. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension as everyone understood the significance of today's events. Queen Camilla herself appeared calm and composed, though those closest to her could detect subtle signs of anxiety. She had worked tirelessly to earn public acceptance and respect, transforming from the woman once blamed for Charles's divorce to a beloved queen consort. Today's ceremony was meant to celebrate her achievements, but she knew it would inevitably be overshadowed by Charles's intended message to Harry. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic Ocean in Montecito, California, Harry sat in his modern mansion's sunlit living room, unaware of the storm brewing in London. Meghan was upstairs putting their children down for afternoon naps while Harry scrolled through news updates on his tablet. The distance between him and his family felt both protective and isolating, a barrier he had built but now struggled to maintain. The preparations at Buckingham Palace continued with military precision. Palace staff arranged flowers, positioned cameras, and coordinated with security teams. Every detail had been planned months in advance, yet nothing could have prepared them for the emotional weight of what was about to unfold. The ceremony was scheduled to honor Camilla's work with domestic violence charities, literacy programs, and her support for military families, causes that had genuinely transformed her public image. Charles walked through the palace corridors, each step heavy with responsibility. He passed portraits of his ancestors, monarchs who had faced their own family crises and national challenges. His mother, Queen Elizabeth II, had navigated decades of royal scandals with grace and discretion, but Charles felt the modern media landscape demanded a different approach. Silence was no longer an option when family disputes played out on international stages. The guest list for today's ceremony read like a who's who of British society. Prime ministers past and present, charity leaders, military officials, and prominent figures from the entertainment world would all witness whatever unfold. Charles understood that his words would be dissected by media analysts, royal correspondents, and family members alike. The pressure was enormous, but his resolve remained firm. In the palace kitchens, staff prepared an elaborate reception menu featuring Camilla's favorite dishes from her childhood. The Queen Consort had specifically requested simple, traditional British fare rather than the elaborate international cuisine typically served at state functions. This personal touch reflected her down-to-earth nature, something that had endeared her to the public over the years. The ceremony's musical program included pieces specifically chosen to reflect themes of family, forgiveness, and unity. The Welsh Guards Band would perform selections that held special meaning for both Charles and Camilla, including melodies from their wedding ceremony years earlier. Music had always been a source of comfort for Charles during difficult times, and today would be no exception. As the morning progressed, royal protection officers conducted final security sweeps while protocol officials reviewed ceremonial procedures one last time. The choreography of royal events required precise timing and flawless execution, especially when the world's media was watching. Any deviation from established protocols would be noticed and analyzed exhaustively. Charles's thoughts frequently returned to Harry during these final preparations. He wondered if his son would watch the ceremony from California, if Meghan would be beside him, if his grandchildren would somehow understand the significance of their grandfather's words. The technological age meant that physical distance no longer prevented real-time communication, yet the emotional distance between father and son seemed vast and unbridgeable. The king had consulted with trusted advisors about the wisdom of addressing family matters during a public ceremony. Some counseled against it, warning of potential backlash and media speculation. Others argued that the royal family's survival in the modern era required transparency and authentic emotion. Charles ultimately decided that his dual role as king and father demanded he address the situation directly. Palace staff made final adjustments to the ceremonial hall's decorations. Flowers arranged in Camilla's favorite colors, soft blues and cream whites, adorned every surface. Photographs from her various charitable endeavors lined the walls, creating a visual narrative of her transformation from private citizen to dedicated queen consort. The displays served as powerful reminders of her genuine commitment to public service. The ceremony would be broadcast live across multiple networks, with simultaneous translation into dozens of languages. Royal events had become global spectacles, drawing audiences far beyond the Commonwealth realms. Today's broadcast was expected to reach over 1 billion viewers worldwide, amplifying whatever message Charles chose to deliver. As noon approached, the first guests began arriving at the palace gates. Diplomatic vehicles bearing various national flags created a steady procession through London's streets. Photography teams captured every arrival, hoping to spot familiar faces or detect hints about the ceremony's potential surprises. The media had already begun speculating about possible family announcements or reconciliations. Charles made one final review of his speech, his eyes lingering on specific passages directed toward Harry. The words were carefully chosen to express both disappointment and love, firmness and hope. He had written and rewritten these sections countless times, seeking the perfect balance between public dignity and private emotion. Today, the world would witness a father's attempt to reach across an ocean of hurt and misunderstanding. The transformation of the ceremonial hall neared completion as palace staff made final adjustments to lighting and acoustics. Every technical detail had been perfected to ensure Charles's words would be heard clearly by every person in attendance and every viewer around the globe. The stage was set for a moment that would either begin healing old wounds or deepen existing divisions within the royal family. Queen Camilla emerged from her private apartments wearing a stunning navy blue ensemble with subtle diamond accents. Her jewelry included pieces gifted by Charles over the years, each carrying personal significance that would not be lost on those who knew their love story. Despite the underlying tensions, she radiated the confidence and grace that had won over even her harshest critics. The final moments before the ceremony began felt suspended in time. Palace staff assumed their positions, guests settled into their assigned seats, and cameras focused on the ceremonial platform. Charles stood in the wings, taking deep breaths and gathering the courage needed to deliver words that might change everything. The weight of history, family, and monarchy rested on his shoulders as he prepared to step into the spotlight and deliver a message that would resonate far beyond the palace walls. In California, Harry glanced at his watch and realized the ceremony would begin soon. Something deep in his heart stirred with anticipation, though he couldn't quite identify why. The distance from his family felt particularly acute today, as if invisible threads were pulling him back toward the life he had left behind. He had no idea that his father was about to deliver the most personal and powerful message of his reign, words that would force both men to confront their fractured relationship and consider whether healing was still possible. The grand ceremonial hall fell into respectful silence as the royal procession began. Queen Camilla entered first, her presence commanding immediate attention from the distinguished guests. The years of public service had given her a natural grace that seemed effortless, though those who knew her well could detect the slight tension in her shoulders. She understood that today's ceremony, meant to celebrate her achievements, would inevitably become overshadowed by whatever Charles planned to say about Harry. Charles followed moments later, his ceremonial uniform adorned with medals representing decades of service to the crown. The weight of tradition was visible in every step he took, yet something different flickered in his eyes, a determination that hadn't been present at previous state functions. Royal correspondent Sarah Matthews, covering the event for the BBC, noticed this subtle change and whispered to her cameraman to focus closely on the king's expressions. The audience rose in unison as the royal couple took their positions on the ceremonial platform. Among those in attendance, many had witnessed the royal family's evolution over decades. They had seen Charles navigate his tumultuous first marriage, find love again with Camilla, and struggle with the modern challenges facing the monarchy. Today felt different, charged with an electricity that suggested significant announcements were forthcoming. Prime Minister Rachel Thornton sat in the front row, having been briefed by palace officials about the general tone of Charles's speech but not its specific content regarding Harry. The government had learned to expect surprises from this king who seemed determined to modernize the monarchy through transparency rather than traditional discretion. Her hands remained folded, though her political instincts told her that today's ceremony would generate headlines far beyond the usual royal coverage. The ceremony opened with the Welsh Guards band performing Jerusalem, a piece that always stirred deep emotions in Charles. As the familiar melody filled the ornate hall, memories flooded back of family gatherings where music had united them. Harry had always loved this particular hymn, often humming along during church services at Sandringham. The irony wasn't lost on Charles that music which once brought his family together now served as backdrop for addressing their separation. Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby delivered the opening blessing, his words carefully chosen to reflect themes of family, forgiveness, and redemption. The religious leader had counseled the royal family through various crises and understood the spiritual dimensions of Charles's struggle with his son. His prayer included subtle references to prodigal children and patient fathers, language that those familiar with the situation would recognize as deeply meaningful. Queen Camilla's charitable work was showcased through a series of video presentations that highlighted her impact on various causes. Images of her visiting domestic violence shelters, reading to children in underprivileged schools, and supporting military families created a powerful narrative of genuine service. The woman once vilified by tabloids had transformed herself into a figure of compassion and dedication, earning respect through actions rather than titles. As each video segment played, Charles watched with genuine pride in his wife's accomplishments. Yet his mind repeatedly drifted to Harry, wondering if his son was watching from California, if he could see the family he had left behind continuing their work without him. The parallel narratives of inclusion and exclusion, celebration and sorrow, created an emotional complexity that threatened to overwhelm even the king's practiced composure. The first speaker was Dame Catherine Morrison, head of Safe Spaces, a domestic violence charity that had received significant support from Camilla. Her testimony about the Queen Consort's hands-on approach to helping abuse survivors was both moving and authentic. Dame Catherine spoke of late-night phone calls when crisis situations arose, of Camilla's insistence on visiting shelters unannounced to truly understand the challenges faced by vulnerable women and children. During Dame Catherine's speech, palace staff noticed Charles repeatedly glancing at his watch. The timing of his own address had been calculated to ensure maximum global audience, particularly to accommodate viewing times in California where Harry would most likely be watching. Every detail had been planned to maximize the impact of words that had been months in the making. The second tribute came from Colonel James Harrison, representing the military family's support network that Camilla had championed. His emotional account of how the Queen Consort had helped his organization support wounded veterans and their families brought tears to many eyes in the audience. The colonel's voice cracked slightly as he described Camilla's visits to rehabilitation centers, her genuine interest in soldiers' recovery, and her ability to bring hope to families facing impossible challenges. As the tributes continued, the international media coverage intensified. Royal correspondents in news studios around the world provided commentary on Camilla's transformation and speculated about potential surprises in Charles's upcoming speech. Social media buzzed with real-time reactions from viewers who sensed that something significant was about to unfold beyond the usual ceremonial proceedings. In Montecito, Harry had indeed begun watching the ceremony on his laptop, initially out of curiosity about the honor being paid to Camilla. Despite their complicated relationship, he had always respected his stepmother's dedication to her charitable work. Meghan joined him occasionally, offering supportive comments while tending to their children who played nearby, blissfully unaware of the family drama unfolding on screen. The third speaker was Dr. Rebecca Thompson, a literacy advocate whose programs had received substantial backing from Camilla's foundation. She spoke passionately about the Queen Consort's belief that reading could transform lives, particularly for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Her presentation included footage of Camilla reading to groups of excited children, her genuine delight in their responses clearly visible in every frame. As Dr. Thompson concluded her remarks, the atmosphere in the ceremonial hall shifted noticeably. Palace protocol officers moved into position, cameras adjusted their focus, and Charles rose slowly from his chair. The moment everyone had been anticipating was finally at hand. The king approached the podium with measured steps, his speech carefully folded in his jacket pocket, though he had memorized every word. Charles began with traditional acknowledgments, thanking the distinguished guests and praising the organizations being celebrated. His voice carried the authority of decades of public speaking, yet those who knew him well could detect an underlying emotion that suggested deeper waters ahead. The formal opening provided necessary context while building toward the personal revelations that would soon follow. The king's praise for Camilla was heartfelt and specific, detailing her journey from private citizen to dedicated public servant. He spoke of her courage in taking on a role that came with intense scrutiny, her persistence in proving doubters wrong through consistent action, and her genuine compassion for those society often overlooked. These words drew warm applause from the audience, many of whom had witnessed Camilla's remarkable transformation firsthand. As Charles transitioned into the more personal portion of his address, the hall fell into absolute silence. Royal watchers recognized the subtle shift in his tone, the way his formal delivery began incorporating more intimate inflections. Camera operators zoomed in on his face, capturing every nuance of expression as he prepared to deliver words that had been carefully crafted to reach one specific listener thousands of miles away. The king spoke about the nature of family, about bonds that transcend disagreement and distance, about the responsibilities that come with both love and position. His words were general enough to maintain royal dignity while specific enough to carry unmistakable personal meaning. He talked about the pain of separation, the hope for reconciliation, and the enduring nature of parental love that persists despite misunderstanding and hurt. In California, Harry leaned forward unconsciously as his father's words began resonating with unexpected power. Something in Charles's tone suggested this wasn't typical royal rhetoric but genuine emotion being shared with the world. Meghan noticed the change in her husband's posture and quietly moved closer, sensing that whatever was being said was affecting him deeply. The audience in London remained transfixed as Charles continued building toward his central message. Several guests later described feeling as though they were witnessing not just a royal speech but a father's public appeal to his estranged son. The combination of formal setting and intimate emotion created a unique tension that held everyone's attention completely. Charles paused briefly, his eyes seeming to look beyond the immediate audience toward some distant horizon. In that moment of silence, the weight of years of family struggle was palpable. When he resumed speaking, his voice carried a different quality, less king, more father, speaking words that came directly from his heart rather than from carefully prepared diplomatic language. The transformation in the king's delivery was subtle but unmistakable to those trained to read royal communications. Palace insiders recognized that Charles was deviating from his prepared text, adding spontaneous elements that made his message more personal and urgent. These unscripted additions would prove to be the most powerful moments of the entire ceremony. As Charles built toward his direct message to Harry, the global audience grew larger by the minute. Social media platforms experienced unprecedented traffic as viewers shared clips and commentary in real time. News organizations prepared special bulletins, sensing that they were witnessing a historic moment in royal family dynamics that would generate coverage for weeks to come. The ceremonial hall's acoustics carried Charles's voice with perfect clarity to every corner of the space. His words would soon carry much further, across oceans and continents, reaching the son who had chosen distance over duty, independence over institution. The stage was set for the most personal and powerful moment of Charles's reign, words that would either begin healing old wounds or confirm that some divisions were simply too deep to bridge. The moment Charles began speaking directly about family loyalty and royal responsibility, the atmosphere in the ceremonial hall became electric with anticipation. His voice carried a new intensity as he departed from the celebratory tone of honoring Camilla to address more complex themes of duty, sacrifice, and the challenges of modern monarchy. Every person in attendance understood they were about to witness something unprecedented in recent royal history. Today we celebrate not just individual achievement, but the power of commitment, Charles began, his eyes scanning the audience before settling on the cameras that would carry his words worldwide. We celebrate the courage to serve something larger than ourselves, even when that service demands personal sacrifice. The words were carefully chosen, each phrase building toward a message that transcended the immediate ceremony to address deeper questions about family, duty, and reconciliation. In California, Harry felt his breath catch as his father's words began taking on personal significance. The formal royal language couldn't disguise the underlying emotion in Charles's voice, an intensity that Harry recognized from childhood conversations when his father was trying to teach important life lessons. Meghan reached over and took his hand, sensing the profound impact these words were having on her husband despite the thousands of miles separating father and son. Charles continued his address with growing passion, speaking about the weight of responsibility that comes with royal birth and the understanding that personal desires must sometimes yield to larger obligations. Those born into this family carry privileges that come with corresponding duties, he said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. We are not merely individuals pursuing personal happiness, but guardians of an institution that serves millions of people across the Commonwealth and beyond. The king's words resonated deeply with many in the audience who had witnessed the royal family's struggles to balance private desires with public expectations. Prince William shifted slightly in his seat, understanding that his father's message applied to all royal family members but was particularly directed toward his absent brother. Princess Anne nodded almost imperceptibly, her own decades of dutiful service giving her deep appreciation for Charles's emphasis on commitment over convenience. Service to others has always been the cornerstone of meaningful royal life, Charles declared, his voice gaining strength. When we choose personal comfort over public duty, when we prioritize our individual stories over our collective responsibility, we diminish not just ourselves but the very institution that gives our lives meaning and purpose. The words carried unmistakable criticism of Harry's decision to abandon royal duties, yet they were wrapped in language that emphasized ideals rather than personal attacks. As Charles spoke, camera operators captured the reactions of various audience members. Archbishop Welby listened with the intense attention of someone who understood the spiritual and moral dimensions of the king's message. Former prime ministers present recognized the political implications of a monarch so directly addressing family discord. Military representatives appreciated the emphasis on duty and service that had always defined their own professional lives. The international media coverage intensified as royal correspondents began providing real-time analysis of Charles's unexpected personal address. BBC royal editor Sarah Matthews whispered urgent commentary into her microphone, explaining to viewers that they were witnessing an extraordinary departure from traditional royal discretion. "This is unlike anything we've seen from a reigning monarch," she noted. King Charles is addressing family matters with unprecedented directness. In the ceremonial hall, Queen Camilla maintained perfect composure while listening to her husband's passionate defense of royal duty. She understood better than anyone the personal cost of the family's fracture, having watched Charles struggle with the pain of losing his younger son to geographic and emotional distance. Her own relationship with her stepchildren had been carefully cultivated over years, making Harry's departure particularly painful for her as well. Charles's speech took on an increasingly personal tone as he addressed themes of forgiveness and reconciliation. True strength lies not in maintaining distance when relationships become difficult, but in finding ways to bridge differences while honoring our fundamental commitments, he declared. The words carried obvious relevance to his situation with Harry, though they were crafted carefully enough to avoid appearing like a public rebuke of his son's choices. Across the Atlantic, Harry found himself deeply affected by his father's words despite his long-standing grievances against the royal institution. The combination of public setting and private message created a unique emotional impact that forced him to confront his own feelings about family separation. "He's talking to you," Meghan said softly, recognizing the personal nature of Charles's seemingly formal address. The king's voice carried new urgency as he approached the climax of his message. "When family members choose different paths, the bonds of love need not break," he said, his words carefully measured but emotionally charged. "Distance, whether geographic or philosophical, cannot diminish the fundamental connections that unite us." But those connections require nurturing, communication, and mutual respect for the responsibilities we all carry. Several guests in the audience later described feeling as though they were witnessing not just a royal speech but a father's public plea for reconciliation with his estranged son. The formal setting couldn't disguise the personal pain underlying Charles's words, the genuine desire for healing that motivated his unprecedented public address of private family matters. Charles spoke directly about the nature of constitutional monarchy and its dependence on family unity. "The institution we serve is stronger when our family is whole," he declared. "Personal grievances must not be allowed to undermine centuries of tradition and service. We have responsibilities to each other that transcend individual comfort or contemporary fashion." The message was clearly directed at Harry's decision to prioritize personal happiness over royal duty. The global audience continued growing as news of Charles's unexpected personal address spread through social media and news networks. Hashtags related to the ceremony began trending worldwide as viewers shared clips and commentary about the king's direct approach to addressing family discord. Royal watchers who had followed the Harry situation for years recognized this as a potentially pivotal moment in the ongoing family drama. In the ceremonial hall, the silence was profound as Charles built toward his most direct message yet. "To those family members who have chosen different paths, know that the door remains open," he said, his voice carrying both firmness and love. "But return must be accompanied by recognition of responsibility, by understanding that our positions come with duties that cannot be abandoned without consequence." The words balanced invitation with expectation, love with requirement. Harry felt tears welling in his eyes as his father's words reached across the distance between them. Despite years of anger and resentment, the fundamental love between father and son remained strong enough to create profound emotional impact. The public nature of the message somehow made it more powerful, forcing Harry to confront the reality that his choices affected not just his immediate family but the broader institution they had all served. Charles's speech reached its emotional peak as he addressed the universal nature of family love and the particular challenges facing those born into positions of privilege and responsibility. "Love endures beyond disagreement, beyond distance, beyond the pain that sometimes accompanies family relationships," he declared. "But love without respect for shared obligations becomes meaningless sentiment rather than binding commitment." The king's final words on family matters carried both hope and warning. "To all members of our family, whether present or absent today, remember that we are stronger together than apart, that our individual happiness means little if it comes at the expense of our collective purpose," he said. "The invitation to full participation in this family and this institution remains open, but it requires genuine commitment to service above self." As Charles concluded this portion of his address and returned to celebrating Camilla's achievements, the audience remained visibly moved by the emotional intensity of his personal message. Many guests later described feeling privileged to witness such authentic royal emotion, while others worried about the implications of a monarch addressing private family matters so directly in such a public forum. The ceremony continued with musical performances and additional tributes to Queen Camilla, but the atmosphere had been fundamentally changed by Charles's unexpected personal address. Every subsequent moment felt anticlimactic compared to the raw emotion and direct communication that had characterized the king's message to his absent son. In California, Harry sat in stunned silence as the ceremony continued, his father's words echoing in his mind with powerful resonance. The public nature of the message had somehow made it impossible to dismiss or rationalize away, forcing him to confront the deep pain his choices had caused while also acknowledging the genuine love that motivated his father's unprecedented public appeal for reconciliation and return. The global media response was immediate and overwhelming, with news organizations around the world preparing special coverage of what was already being called the most significant royal family moment in decades. Charles had successfully used a ceremony honoring his wife to deliver the most personal and powerful message of his reign, words that would either catalyze reconciliation or confirm the permanent nature of his family's division. The ceremony concluded with thunderous applause that seemed to acknowledge not just the celebration of Queen Camilla's achievements, but the extraordinary courage King Charles had shown in addressing his family's most painful rift so publicly. As guests rose from their seats, the buzz of conversation filled the ceremonial hall with unprecedented energy. Royal correspondents frantically typed updates while diplomats exchanged meaningful glances, everyone understanding they had witnessed a historic moment in royal family dynamics. Charles descended from the platform with measured steps, his composure intact despite the emotional intensity of his address. Queen Camilla moved gracefully to his side, her subtle squeeze of his hand conveying support and understanding. She had stood by him through the preparation of those words, knowing they represented both political risk and personal necessity. Together, they began the traditional post-ceremony reception, though both understood that today's event would be remembered far more for its personal revelations than its formal purpose. Prince William approached his parents immediately, his face reflecting the complex emotions of someone caught between loyalty to his father and love for his brother. "That was powerful, Papa," he said quietly, using the childhood term that emphasized family bonds over royal protocol. The heir to the throne understood better than anyone the delicate balance between public duty and private feelings that had motivated his father's unprecedented speech. Princess, and ever the pragmatist, offered her own assessment with characteristic directness. "Well, Charles, you've certainly given them something to write about," she observed, her dry humor masking deep approval for her brother's courage. As someone who had spent decades serving the crown without seeking personal recognition, she appreciated the emphasis Charles had placed on duty and institutional loyalty over individual desires. Meanwhile, in California, Harry sat motionless in his living room as the ceremony's conclusion rolled across his laptop screen. The familiar strains of "God Save the King" that ended the broadcast created an unexpected emotional response, reminding him of countless family gatherings where that anthem had represented unity rather than division. Meghan watched her husband carefully, recognizing the profound impact his father's words had created despite years of carefully constructed emotional barriers. The immediate media response exceeded even the palace's expectations for intense coverage. Within minutes of the ceremony's conclusion, major news networks had interrupted regular programming to analyze Charles's unprecedented personal address. Royal experts who had followed the family for decades struggled to find historical parallels for a monarch so directly addressing private family matters in such a public forum. BBC royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell, veteran of decades covering the monarchy, appeared visibly moved as he provided analysis from outside Buckingham Palace. "In 30 years of reporting on this family, I have never witnessed anything quite like what we saw today," he told viewers worldwide. King Charles has fundamentally altered the terms of engagement between the monarchy and public discourse about royal family relationships. Social media platforms experienced unprecedented traffic as clips from Charles's speech went viral within hours. The hashtag royal message dominated trending topics globally, with users sharing emotional reactions to the king's direct appeal to his son. Public opinion seemed largely supportive of Charles's approach, with many praising his courage in addressing family issues directly rather than maintaining traditional royal silence. At Buckingham Palace, the post-ceremony reception continued with subdued energy as guests processed what they had witnessed. Foreign dignitaries who had expected a routine ceremonial event found themselves part of a historic family moment that would influence royal relationships for years to come. Conversations centered not on Queen Camilla's achievements, despite their genuine significance, but on the implications of Charles's message for future family dynamics. Prime Minister Rachel Thornton found herself fielding questions from international colleagues about the constitutional implications of the King's personal address. While Charles had carefully avoided specific political statements, his emphasis on duty and institutional loyalty carried obvious relevance to contemporary debates about the monarchy's role in modern British society. The royal household staff worked with practiced efficiency to manage the reception while simultaneously coordinating the intense media response. Palace press officers faced unprecedented demand for comment and clarification, though official statements would be limited to confirming that the king's words spoke for themselves. The decision to let Charles's message stand without additional interpretation demonstrated confidence in its impact and meaning. In California, Harry finally moved from his position on the couch, walking to the window overlooking the Pacific Ocean that had become his new horizon. The physical distance from his family felt simultaneously protective and isolating as his father's words continued echoing in his mind. Years of carefully constructed justifications for his choices suddenly seemed less solid, less certain than they had moments before. Meghan approached her husband carefully, understanding that whatever happened next would fundamentally affect their family's future. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly, her own complex feelings about the royal family creating uncertainty about how to respond to Charles's public appeal. The message had been directed specifically at Harry, but its implications would inevitably affect her and their children as well. He meant every word, Harry said quietly, his voice carrying recognition of his father's genuine emotion despite the formal setting. That wasn't royal rhetoric. That was. He struggled to find words that could capture the complexity of what he had witnessed, a king using his platform to reach out to an estranged son while maintaining dignity and institutional authority. The global reach of Charles's message became apparent as international news organizations provided extensive coverage throughout the day. From Australian breakfast shows to American evening news programs, royal experts analyzed every nuance of the king's words while speculating about potential responses from Harry and Meghan. The ceremony had achieved Charles's goal of ensuring his message reached its intended audience. Back in London, Charles and Camilla retreated to their private apartments as palace staff managed the continued media frenzy. The king had accomplished what he set out to do: deliver a message that balanced personal appeal with institutional dignity, words that could not be ignored or dismissed. Whether those words would produce the reconciliation he hoped for remained uncertain, but he had spoken his truth in the most powerful way possible. Queen Camilla reflected on the day's events with mixed emotions. The ceremony meant to honor her achievements had become something far more significant, a pivotal moment in royal family history that might either heal old wounds or confirm their permanence. Her own journey from controversial figure to respected queen consort gave her a unique insight into the possibility of redemption and transformation. As evening fell in London, the palace released a brief statement confirming that King Charles's speech reflected his personal views and hopes for family unity. The careful wording avoided specific references to Prince Harry while acknowledging the personal nature of the message. Palace insiders suggested that Charles felt a sense of relief at finally expressing publicly what he had been thinking privately for months. The international response continued growing as the ceremony highlights were broadcast repeatedly across global networks. Royal families in other constitutional monarchies watched with particular interest, recognizing the broader implications of Charles's approach to balancing personal relationships with institutional responsibilities. The speech was being studied not just as family drama but as constitutional precedent. In California, Harry's phone began buzzing with messages from friends, relatives, and former royal household staff who had watched the ceremony. The immediate response from people who knew both father and son personally was overwhelming support for Charles's approach and encouragement for Harry to consider reconciliation. The public nature of the appeal seemed to give others permission to express their own hopes for family healing. As night descended on both sides of the Atlantic, the full impact of Charles's message remained to be determined. The king had successfully used a ceremony honoring his wife to deliver the most personal and powerful appeal of his reign, words carefully crafted to reach across an ocean of hurt and misunderstanding. Whether those words would prove strong enough to bridge the chasm between father and son would only become clear in the days and weeks ahead. The day that began as a celebration of Queen Camilla's service had transformed into something far more significant, a moment when a monarch chose vulnerability over tradition, when a father's love proved stronger than royal protocol, when hope for reconciliation was expressed in the most public way possible. Charles had delivered his message with dignity and power, but the response remained in Harry's hands, thousands of miles away, where distance provided both protection and isolation from the family bonds that Charles's words had so powerfully reaffirmed. The world would now wait to see whether love and duty could overcome pride and hurt, whether family bonds could prove stronger than geographical and emotional distance, whether a king's public appeal to his son would mark the beginning of reconciliation or serve as a final, eloquent acknowledgement that some divisions run too deep to heal. The message had been delivered with unprecedented clarity and emotion, only time would reveal whether it had been received with equal openness and understanding.